Hello again, everyone. Welcome to part 3 of our Chapter 14 lecture series. This section is entitled The Second American Revolution. The focus question for this section is, how did the Civil War transform the national economy and create a stronger nation-state? Some historians have argued that the American Civil War can be seen in many ways as a second American Revolution, in that it so fundamentally transformed the American understanding of freedom itself, as well as the nature of the relationship between the people, the state, and the federal governments. The freedom at this period was still very much contested. We've been discussing this throughout the last several chapters. In the North, liberty meant free labor, as in the labor by free people. Into Southern whites, liberty conveyed this sense of mastership, that one can only be truly free if there was a subservient people under some sort of enslavement. The triumph of the North meant that the Northern understanding of freedom became the national norm. The war also forged a new national self-consciousness. Emancipation reinforced American notions of the United States as a progressive force in the world, which is somewhat ironic considering that the United States was one of the last to actually emancipate its slaves in the Western world. Northern victory also cemented the primacy of the federal government over the state governments and set the stage for further consolidation of authority at the national level. In the North during the Civil War, the very idea of liberty itself faced intense challenges. This intense new nationalism that was stirred up in response to the war made wartime criticism seem to some, particularly Abraham Lincoln, equivalent to treason. Lincoln actually had numerous people arrested for so-called treasonous activities, most often speaking out against the war or expressing some sort of sympathy for the Confederate cause. This included newspaper editors, of course, for publishing such treasonous sorts of language. He also suspended habeas corpus several times, which is essentially the right of people to be seen by an impartial judge to adjudicate whether the charges brought against them were even fair or not. He also placed the entire state of Maryland under military occupation and martial law for quite a period of time, because Maryland was one of those border slave states, and there was incredible amounts of Southern sympathies in that state, so much so that the potential of some sort of rebellion in Maryland, or even Maryland eventually seceding from the Union itself, especially in those first few years of the war when the Confederates seemed to have the upper hand, was too much for Lincoln to even fathom at that point. So he placed the entire state under military occupation in order to quell any sort of dissent and prevent Maryland from going over to the Confederate side. Most of these activities were, again, fundamentally at odds with the idea of the free individual as most Americans understood it. And Lincoln came under quite a bit of fire for this at the time, and, got accusations of, tyrant and dictator. Some of those accusations still echo today in some works by some historians of the era. The Lincoln administration quickly took advantage of the necessities of the war effort to consolidate and enhance the power of the federal government. This enhanced federal power met a rising class of capitalist entrepreneurs who were more than willing to take government money to produce war materials. Wartime inflation caused by an influx of new dollars into the economy, and these government contracts made the profits of industry boom. The Northern government was in general committed to rapid economic development, and Congress quickly adopted new measures to encourage economic growth, which included the Homestead Act, which carved up huge sections of the Western territories into tiny parcels to be handed out essentially for free to hundreds of thousands of families to encourage them to move west and build up the economies of those regions. There was also the Morrill Land Grant College Act, which allowed land and money on which states could establish agricultural and technical schools. There was also huge support and massive amounts of money funded into the Transcontinental Railroad, which the completion of reduced the cross-country journey from coast to coast from 4 to 5 months to a mere 6 days, which again radically transformed the speed of economic development. There were also dramatic changes in financial policy in the Union to fund the war. There were increased tariffs, whole new taxes, including the very first national income tax in American history, and the government printed millions in paper money to fund the war effort. They also standardized the national currency. Gone were the days when state and local banks could issue their own currencies that competed with a national currency. Now national currencies were standardized and unified. Economic policies in general favored manufacturing, railroadmen, and financiers. All of this combined to, again, vastly increase the power and size of the federal government. Although it was men fighting in the war, women were certainly not unaffected by the conflict. And many took this opportunity to expand their access into the public sphere. Northern women took advantage of the wartime labor shortage to move into new jobs, including clerical jobs in the national government. Hundreds of thousands of women joined organizations that raised money for the war effort and participated in sanitary fairs, which were essentially craft fairs where they sold homemade goods, again, to help fund the war effort. This pot holder you hear is an example of the type of homemade goods that would have been sold at such sanitary fairs, as they were called. Many leaders of the post-war movement for women's rights took advantage of this temporarily expanded public sphere to gain more experience, and they used that experience in their later struggle for women's equality and rights. The North certainly saw its share of internal strife due to the Civil War. Mounting casualties and rapid social change divided the North into pro- and anti-war camps. The draft law caused widespread indignation. This was the first military draft in American history, and it increased class resentments because wealthier Northerners could pay their way out of the draft, but of course not so wealthy Northerners had no such option available to them. This also was a period that saw the birth of the Northern labor movement, as it would be understood in the later part of the 19th century. Workers were increasingly angry over the rising profits of these industrial titans emerging during this period, while the rising inflation eroded the value of their pay. There was also plenty of racist reaction to the changing status of blacks in Northern society. Racism was still very much alive and in full flower in the North at this time. All of these issues combined and kind of exploded in July of 1863 with the New York City draft riots, some of the most violent and deadly urban kind of rebellion sorts of situations in American history. Over 100 people lost their lives in these draft riots, and it really signified just how divided and vitriolic many of the issues surrounding the war in the North had become by this period. Alright, gang, that concludes part 3 of our Chapter 14 lecture series. As always, study hard, and I'll see you soon.